before you get some Tennessee hoops, man, and they are really, really good. I think some people took us making fun of Tom Izzo yesterday and his comments that they're a Final Four team. We were making fun of him. I think some people took that the wrong way.
People got really mad at us for it.
Yeah, you're like a total jerk. Hey, so this guy that I've got up on the screen here, who is this dude?
No, this is the guy I was saying earlier.
It looks like Vanilla Ice's, for those of you that are on the audio platform, it looks like Vanilla Ice's grandson.
So this guy, I was laughing earlier. This is the guy Jim Mora decided to start at running back for the first 5 games of the season at UConn, Victor Rosa. Dave, does he look like a running back at all?
No, for those that don't know, he has curly hair, and unlike most running backs, he's Caucasian, which is fine. There's a Christian McCaffrey out there running around.
He doesn't look like Christian McCaffrey, nor does he look like Toby Gerhart or whatever other Stanford running back that was white from that time.
Yeah, or play like them either. This Tennessee basketball team, an exhibition win once again, and we'll get into the conversation about Rick Barnes and his lack of postseason success. But aside from that, I mean, that'll be a February conversation, a March conversation. But just scale of 1 to 10, when you look at this roster, Caleb, how excited should Tennessee fans be about what the Vols will field this year on the hoops side?
Well, first of all, let me apologize to all the commenters on our video the other day on Tom Izzo. I was obviously wrong. I mean, the way Tennessee played at Lenoir-Rhyne, they're going to win the national title, because beating Lenoir-Rhyne in an exhibition, guys, is like the first step. Next step, national title. I mean, it's basically the same thing. Exhibition games are just that big of a deal.
Here he goes. The sarcasm alert is on for
we
Caleb
were
Calhoun.
railed 2 days ago. They're like, oh my God, the exhibition means so much, and it was such an important win.
Yeah. And see, so if you rip Caleb, we have to hear more of that voice. But Tennessee, for any of those that thought we were ripping Tennessee's basketball program, that wasn't the case at all. I just thought it was
you were ripping people who thought that game mattered.
Yeah. Okay. So especially without 2 of your best players in Zeigler and Vescovi. Tennessee basketball, your thoughts on how good this program can be. And let's talk regular season for a second, because one game does determine ultimately what you do. And that loss could be the first round, second round, Sweet 16, Final Four, or they could win it all. But as far as a team that could potentially win the regular season, could get a 1 or 2 or 3 seed, what do you think of this team's potential from what you've seen so far?
Okay, in all seriousness, it's through the roof. And it's through the roof because of the depth and because of Barnes willing to change his philosophy. I'm going to tell you what stood out to me yesterday, Dave. And it's not about how they played in the game. They beat Lenoir-Rhyne. I swear, if anybody brings up how they looked playing Lenoir-Rhyne, I'm just going to throw my headset. Okay, that just drives me crazy. But I will say that it's how Barnes managed the roster. Zakai, Zeigler, and Santi Vescovi were both out. Those are both guards. You and I both know Barnes has had a bad habit of wanting to play big still in this age of basketball. He used to like those like tweener stretch 4 guys playing the 3 and then 2 true post players at power forward and center. That's what he's always liked. And this time, even with his 2 starting guards out, he still played small ball. Jemai Mashak and Josiah-Jordan James were out. Okay, Jonas Adu was the center. He was the big guy. But then he had Don Connect, Jordan Gainey, Josiah-Jordan James, and Jemai Mashak as the starters. All 4 of those are guard/wing players, but none of them are post players. And so I think what we're seeing is that Barnes is willing to play small ball now, and not because he's forced to, because of some injuries. Now, Toby Awaka came off the bench, had 11 points, and he is a big guy. I was worried Barnes would start Adu and Awaka together. He's not doing that. And because of Barnes' philosophy, I think Tennessee should be excited because Barnes has finally joined 21st century basketball.
Okay, so you're telling me you think there's a philosophical shift in the way Rick Barnes is going to put a team together. Is that what you're telling me?
I do. I think there's a philosophical shift.
Okay, I don't want to be pessimistic here, but I'm going to play devil's advocate. A philosophical shift at, what is he, 68 years old?
Yep.
Okay. A philosophical shift usually doesn't happen when you're 68 years old. Okay. And when that philosophical shift is tested and that philosophy is tested in tough times, and every team's going to have tough times. Very few teams just run through the regular season undefeated or with 1 or 2 losses. You tend to fall back on that. So, Caleb, how concerned are you that Rick Barnes could fall back on his usual coaching, which is to be very conservative?
Yeah, playing tough defense and using size. I think he could, because he has the roster to do that too. Unfortunately for Tennessee, I could definitely see.
So they have too much versatility in their talent.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
So I think that is a legitimate concern, but I'm not so sure, because Rick Barnes has changed his philosophy before. He just hasn't changed it the way he needs to. So, I mean, Rick Barnes has gone tempo in the past. He's lived a little more by the 3-point line than he wanted to in the past. So I think the philosophy, I think he'll actually be patient and be able to stick with what he's doing. Your example, I will say, it's funny. I don't know where to go with this, because I think of, when Steve Spurrier was in South Carolina, he had a philosophical shift and moved away from the fun and gun, knew he had to, and did a great job as a coach. But I did feel like when things got a little tight, he reverted back to just trying to desperately throw it every time to make a play, even at South Carolina.
Well, and Steve Spurrier also, I thought he placed an importance on running the football that he didn't in 2001, especially against Tennessee in that game. And it was chuck it, chuck it, chuck it. And his game plan, no offense to Travis Stevens or any of those guys, Casey Clausen, or the guys that played a great job on defense, but Steve Spurrier's decision to not run the ball more often is the reason that game went Tennessee's way. So I think you're always going to fall back on kind of what you know and what your base beliefs are. That would be my concern for Tennessee's fan base, is you go out there and you're run and gun, and then you get to February and you get a little tighter. That would be my concern for Tennessee's fan base, because you don't want to see the run and gun and you get all excited and then suddenly you're like, oh, well, that didn't work out very well.
Well, Barnes has never abandoned tempo, to be fair. He actually always has tempo. He just likes to play big, rely on the mid-range when they're scoring out of half-court sets. And he focuses heavily on defense. So he's not as much. What he doesn't like is the fluid finesse shooting on the outside, moving the ball around the perimeter. You're right. He could revert back. I mean, it depends on how a lot of this is how Barnes runs his practices. He's very grinding in his practices. I think you know that, Dave. You know the coaches that just it's kind of like the Jim Harbaugh effect. You know this, Jim Harbaugh in football. It's a known thing. He really grinds everybody around him, doesn't he? To where you're just kind of mentally drained by the time kickoff happens. A lot of times, if you're Michigan players or San Francisco players or wherever, that happens to Tennessee.
You think Rick Barnes grinds them down?
I think he grinds. I think he grinds players, yeah. And I think that's why you see these February slumps with him a lot of times, because they're mentally drained. A lot of coaches that like to coach defense do that. John Calipari does it. Why do you think John Calipari only has 1 national title? Because
maybe Rick Barnes just needs to go Jerry Green and have a couple of pops before practice.
I mean, why not? Why not?
1, 2, 3 tequila.
Watch some soap operas, right? I mean,
that was Wade.
Yeah, they're right. But what you sometimes need I mean, and look, it goes both ways, because I know Jimmy Johnson grinded the Cowboys and they won 2 Super Bowls out of it. So I don't know what the balance is to grind versus to maybe pull back and just, let them mentally clear their head.
Well, you win. I mean, and here's the other thing. You win, and those Jimmy Johnson teams, don't get me started, were so deep. I mean, they had their second string won the 3rd Super Bowl with Barry Switzer as a coach. Those were second string players on the 92 team. So it was basically like, if you don't want to go out there and grind, somebody else is going to, now. So does Tennessee have that much depth where you can say that if you don't go out there and grind, somebody else can step in for you? But again, that I'm getting off topic. This is a team that has a philosophical shift with their coach. That's the news here. We think, right?
Yes, but part of the philosophical shift is practice, because Barnes, the reason I say grind is because Barnes always he's not against the 3-point line. He just likes to play big and use the mid-range. And then in practice, he grinds because he coaches defense heavily more than anything else. And so the question becomes, is he still solely pushing his players on defense? Because as you know, Dave, the effort you give on defensive-oriented coaches in basketball, the effort that requires to play the level of defense to the standard that those coaches want, it does drain you a lot mentally, particularly when great offense always beats great defense.
Now I'm going to do what I said I wouldn't do. Tennessee's a number 1 seed. They win the regular season in the SEC. I don't care if they win the SEC tournament because it's a meaningless event. Even a tornado through it downtown Atlanta couldn't stop that thing because nobody cared. And they played in front of like 500 fans. And okay, so if Tennessee's a number 1 seed, if Tennessee wins the regular season and they get bounced in the first or second round of the NCAA tournament, will most fans want to risk a change?
I think most Tennessee fans have perspective. Now I could be wrong on that because I know most fans wanted to risk the change with Jerry Green in 2001, but I think the difference was, you know more about that than I do, Dave. But wasn't it Jerry Green inherited a bunch of Kevin O'Neill recruits and just rolled the ball out and didn't even bother to coach them? Wasn't that the case with Jerry Green?
Yeah, that was exact. I mean, he literally said those words in a practice before an SEC tournament game. He goes, let's just practice will just be 2 hours of street ball. And I'll never forget a reporter next to me. I'm not going to name him, but he's a big hoops guy, and he wanted Tennessee to go deep in the tournament. Typically reporters don't root for people, but root for the teams they cover. But you want your team to go deep in the tournament because you get to go to more games, and covering an NCAA tournament is a lot of fun. And I remember him saying, GD, that's the effing stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Because, when you go into that week before the SEC tournament, you only have, 6 to 8 practices before the NCAA tournament. So you should be working on something instead of up and down street ball for 2 hours. The guys can go do that on his own. There we go.
Yeah,
I think Tennessee fans would be incredibly frustrated, and probably a good percentage, 30 to 40%, would be like, all right, let's try something else. But that's me.